Hey guys, today we are going to be talking about the Emancipation Proclamation. And this is one of those things that everybody thinks they know what it's about. Everybody thinks they have a good idea of the Emancipation Proclamation. And it's an important thing, but most people don't really understand it. And it's not exactly what we've been led to believe. We're going to take a closer look, and so go ahead and begin here. Basically, the Abraham Lincoln had this thing. He had it ready to go. He wanted to release it, but he needed to wait till a victory. And the problem was the Union wasn't having a whole lot of soaring victories. We had a leadership problem and in terms of our generals and so forth. So it was after the Battle of Antietam. And Antietam was a victory in the, I mean, kind of, right? It was the bloodiest single day of the Civil War. This was a terrible, terrible, bloody event. And really nobody won. In reality, it was a draw. But because the Confederates left the field first, the Union claims their withdrawal signifies a Union victory. And so we claim victory. Doesn't mean that it was, but we claim it. And if that's what's published in the newspapers, and if that's what people begin to believe, then so be it. We've said in here many, many times, perception trumps reality. And we needed a victory, so we claimed a victory. Now, on the backs of that so-called victory, right, that really was a draw, but we'll let them have it. So on the backs of the victory of Antietam, Abraham Lincoln is going to release the Emancipation Proclamation. And basically what it does is it frees the slaves. Most people, well, just it freed all the slaves. This is fantastic. It doesn't do that. It frees only the slaves in the rebellious territories of the South. That's it. And now here's the interesting thing is, does Lincoln, if the South has seceded, if the Confederate States of America are indeed their own country, does Lincoln have any authority to do that? Can he? That would be like us trying to pass a law that Mexico has to follow or that France has to adhere to, right? We don't have any authority in other countries. And so the South claims, how in the world is Lincoln going to free the slaves in territory he doesn't control? You want to free the slaves in the Union? Whatever, you knock yourself out. But down here, you have no authority. And they're probably, I don't know, somewhat right in that. How is he going to do that, right? He can't really enforce it. But he's going to use it as leverage in an ultimatum. He's basically going to say, listen, you either return to the Union now, and if you do, then you'll be able to keep your slaves. Otherwise, when we conquer you by force, your slaves will be released, right? And it'll be abolished. And so this is a little different than what we have been led to believe, right? And it shows us that the war for Lincoln, up until this point, really had been very much not about slavery, but about preservation of the Union. Now, for other people in the North, right, for individuals who were fighting or for different families in different regions, maybe for them it very much was about the end of slavery. But for the government, and specifically for Lincoln, it was about the preservation of the Union. So here's this idea of, I'm going to free the slaves in the Confederate territory if you don't return. So if they returned peacefully to the Union, if we ended this war and any territories that came back of their own free will, they got to keep their slaves. That's a hard thing for a lot of people to swallow because we've been taught a much simplified version of that, and one that really aids in Lincoln's reputation. But anyway, what we're going to see, and let's take a close look here, because there we go. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. What we'll see is that all of the yellow territories, those are Union states, and that's places where slavery had been outlawed already, did not exist. But the orange states, these are the border states, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland. We see that they are Union states, but that slavery exists there. And so Lincoln has to walk this really fine line, right? He can't do anything. If he tries to free the slaves by force, then they may just secede themselves. And we've talked before about how that would be a serious problem. So all of the areas where we see horizontal lines, they are areas where slavery is going to be abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation, but they do not return, which means that only once we conquer them will those slaves be freed. The area with horizontal lines, which we see, the border states all have horizontal lines, they're areas of legal slaveholding. The only other two places we see Tennessee, because by the time this was released, Tennessee was already in control by the Union and the city of New Orleans. So we have a situation here where it doesn't do exactly what we thought it was going to do. When Lincoln and the Union Army march in and liberate a place, then those slaves will be free. Nobody, by the way, accepted the ultimatum. There was no area that said, yes, we're going to come back and we expect to be able to keep our slaves. That did not happen. And I think Lincoln probably knew that that wasn't going to happen, right? He wanted to give them a way. He wanted to be able to say that I gave you a way to come back. I gave you a way to come back that doesn't affect your way of life or your economy or your what you see as your personal property. So he gave them opportunity and they denied it. Now he has the opportunity to say, we tried it your way, right? We tried to give you what you say you wanted and you denied it. Now we're going to do it my way, right? And so the interesting thing here is that this marks a major, major shift in the Civil War because it had been entirely about the preservation of the Union. But now there is a shift. And I think that this, in many ways, enhances the positioning of the Union because we're fighting for not only the preservation of the Union, but also something on a far more moral and ethical basis, right? I think it probably did great things for the morale of the slaves, for the free black populations, those sorts of things. In addition, it sends a signal to countries around the world that had been considering joining on the side of the South. Right? There were indications that France was considering, or that some of these other countries that really wanted good prices for that Southern cotton, and whose economies had been suffering because of the lack of exports, were considering recognizing the South's sovereignty, recognize them as an independent country. And so in doing this, Lincoln sends this out in mass, right? This is copied and sent to every country out there. And what it does, since we were one of the last countries to outlaw slavery, it kind of frames this whole debate in a different light. If you join with the South, you're joining on the side of slavery. And for most countries who had already outlawed slavery, that was untenable. They could not possibly join in on the side of a pro-slavery faction if the war was going to be about slavery. If it was about independence, if it was about federal power versus states' rights, okay, they could join in and not feel bad about that. But once we have the Emancipation Proclamation and it becomes about freeing the slaves, now all of a sudden those foreign countries that may have given financially, may have given troops, may have started a trading partnership and so forth, supported with the Navy as the French did in the Revolution, all of a sudden that puts the halt on that, and it allows this to remain a North-South issue just here within our country. So the Emancipation Proclamation is really very, very important. And it does incredible things for the South because now as we liberate these different areas, those slaves will be free and they will remain free from this point forward, right? There's some legal maneuvering that still has to be done, but ultimately that debate is going to be over with the Emancipation Proclamation. We'll talk about some of the amendments that affect that a little bit later on as we get into Reconstruction. But for now, that's that. Guys, I appreciate you watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel so I can push more videos out to you in a little easier way. And as usual, please leave me any comments. Let me know if there's anything that I forgot or anything that's up for debate. Thanks. We'll catch you next time.